Your host, Javier Betancourt, Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, or CITT. We're the quasi-independent agency of Miami-Dade County charged with overseeing your half-penny sales tax for transportation. And that half penny, by the way, generates more or less $400 million a year, and 20% of that $400 million is distributed to our many municipalities, 34 cities in Miami-Dade County. We're pleased to have a representative of one of those cities here today, the mayor of the village of Pinecrest, Joe Corradino.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. We did this once before. I had such a good time that I jumped at the chance to come back. So,
but we're in nicer confines now.
Oh, this is beautiful.
I think we had some
we were in a hotel lobby before.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So, but you know, given your background also as urban planner and working on a lot of transportation plans, I'm sure there's a host of new things to talk about that we didn't touch on last time.
Absolutely. The world moves pretty quick.
Absolutely. Not always transportation.
Well, no.
Most of the world does.
That makes the rest of the world look like it's moving faster the way we do our transportation.
So, Mr. Mayor, how long have you been mayor now for the village?
I will, by the time I'm done in 26, I'll been in office for 20 years, so 10 of them as mayor. So, that's right.
You started council member.
Council member in 06. Took a break after that. 8 years in, was elected mayor and got a 10-year term because of a charter rearrangement. So I've had a great time. Pinecrest is a wonderful, wonderful community.
Tell us about it.
Well, Pinecrest is a small community, about 18,000 people, very affluent. It was very suburban in nature, and it's got very large lots, a lot of landscaping. And we've taken our time over the years to polish our neighborhoods, not necessarily, our philosophy is to protect our character and enhance our quality of life. And we've meticulously done that to keep that character that we had back before our incorporation in 1996. Not always easy. 18,000 people, we haven't grown a bit, probably lost a few people, but in the transportation world, we're besieged with the problems that many of the other communities are in South Dade, and that is the pressure of the inability to move, right? It's traffic coming through your neighborhoods, a hard time to get to work in the morning, a hard time to get home, even on Saturdays and Sundays to get to the grocery store can be a challenge. Yet we haven't grown a single person.
But there's a lot of growth around you, right?
The way we looked at it from the urban planning perspective is that we've got South Dade, south of 88th Street, about 50% of the geographic area of Miami-Dade County. Wow. It's got 25% of the jobs. So 25% of the population. So plenty of room in South Dade to put more people. The dangerous part is it's got 12% of the jobs of the county. Right. And so hundreds of thousands of people a year or day have to drive up through the neighborhoods. There's only a couple ways out: Turnpike, US 1, Old Cutler Road. So they filter through the neighborhoods: Palmetto Bay, Cutler Bay, Pinecrest, South Miami, and it creates issues. So even though the rapid transit way is coming online soon, I believe it's a housing issue, it's an economic development issue, it's an environmental issue. We have to tackle the transportation problem holistically, and I think that's what we're doing. I think that's what you all are doing at CITT. Kudos to the MPO, TPO, and the County Commission. I think this new group has done excellent, and I think the future. I'm bullish on the future of transportation in Miami-Dade County because I have young, bright leaders involved.
I would say, and I've been following this and working in it for many years. I mean, the stars really have aligned.
Oh yeah.
We have elected officials who get it. We have professionals, who are making things happen. Whereas in the past, maybe things, stalled out. I am bullish as well, but transportation projects take a long time to come to fruition. That's just the nature of the beast, right? And so it's easy to get frustrated. But help is on the way.
Yeah, well, it is easy to get frustrated, and it is a long process, and it's a federal process, and you've got to jump through a lot of hoops and attain a lot of things. And by the way, a lot of these things that we're doing that we need other people's money for are decades-long projects just to construct, let alone to plan and design. I think my father worked on the original Metro Rail project back that was opened in the early 80s, but they started in the early 70s. And it was on the plans in the 60s. So,
and they had the benefit of a federal government that was paying for a much larger share of transit than they do today.
Oh yeah, right now heavy rail is hard to get.
Yeah,
right. And,
about to get harder, I think.
And it's about it's about to get harder. It's about to get a lot harder.
So before we jump into some of those larger county projects, tell us about the village of Pinecrest. So you get a share of those surtax dollars. Being a small municipality, you don't get a lot, but you're doing good things with what you get. So tell us about what you operate in the city with those funds.
Yeah, so again, we get the transportation. We're supposed to spend 20% of it on transit. It's hard to do transit in suburban communities like we are, but we've done it. We've worked with our circulators. We've worked with the freebie type of stuff. We are trying to move people mainly between the budding transit stations that will become more fulsome, right, as the rapid transit way activates. But we're doing a lot of the school kids, trying to move the school kids between parks and schools, trying to take people who want to get to the transit way to the transit way. We experiment with the freebie. We do our shuttle, which is, I don't know if it's on demand right now. I don't know if the rules have changed with on demand or it's just fixed route. Hard to run fixed route in an acre density suburban community. So we're spending our money on that, preparing for getting people used to rapid transit. We're making a giant shift, or contemplating a giant shift this year, to bringing in some people from the Dutch embassy to work on a mobility plan that enables us to preserve capacity for the automobile now and in the future, but get capacity for bicycle and pedestrians, and link the parks and schools and the US 1 corridor with viable bicycle and pedestrian linkages, and just try to make the beginnings of a transformative move so that people don't have to get in a vehicle. The communities in South Florida are post-World War II communities, and just simply not built for...
It's built around the car.
Built around the car. And so
it's kind of hard to retrofit that, right? Both in terms of
you want to tear it
physically
down,
and also even culturally.
Culturally is the hardest part to me, because we have these ideas. The funny thing, when I got elected, I've been elected for close to 20 years, and the hardest thing we've ever done is a freaking sidewalk, because people freak out if you're going to do a sidewalk. It's like, well, it's dangerous. Like, no,
because Pinecrest always had this kind of rural feeling to it as well.
Yeah, they have the same thing in Palmetto Bay too, which is less rural, right, more suburban. But come on, guys, we're doing a sidewalk. Don't let the kids walk on the street. This cars will slow down for them. Saying no, they're going to get killed.
Not with phones. Not these days.
No, right? I mean, it's pretty bad. So culturally, it's very, very difficult. That's changing. Attrition is changing it, and I think the new people in the community are much more willing to embrace cycling and pedestrianism. But it's been difficult. I think the last 20 years is behind. The next 20 years will be infinitely easier, I believe.
Right. So, and you touched on this, a lot of what you're doing is really providing that last mile connectivity from the village, obviously to other destinations in the village, but ultimately also providing that connectivity to the larger transit system. So good segue to the South Corridor. So the South Corridor runs along the busway that has been there for years, the old railway corridor. And it's the first one to be enacted, and it's going to be bus rapid transit gold standard. And it's actively under construction, right? If you drive down South Dixie, you can't miss it.
Looks great.
So tell us about that project. Is the village kind of working with the county to ensure that connectivity, and what is the village's
there was a decades-long debate about what to have, and it was confusing if you listen to the debate. It was like, we want Metro Rail, but Metro Rail sucks, so it doesn't work.
And we don't want the buildings.
And we don't want the buildings. So people would say, I want Metro Rail, but I don't want any density, and that's impossible to have, right? And so it was, and that's coming from the leaders of our community back when, which was embarrassing for them and embarrassing for everybody who watched it. So we had a giant fight in South Dade about this, and thank God my side won, which was, we're not getting Metro Rail. We don't have the density in Metro Rail. It's the next generation's project, right? And only when you decide to build your downtowns, which almost every city but Cutler Bay is rejected at this point in time, you're not going to have the density to do it. So BRT won out. Gold standard. Technically, I believe it's infinitely less expensive, but the travel time is nearly comparable to the $1 billion+ rail system. So Pinecrest welcomes it with open arms. I think it's wonderful. I think our part is to try to stay as leaders within Miami-Dade County, advocating for things that are going to enhance it. I think we need more connectivity to it. I think I don't know if we need more parking, or we need bicycle parking, or we need pedestrian overpasses or underpasses, but some way to get the riders to the system. And I think once it takes hold, it's going to be a game changer for South Dade, because I don't live but 3 miles from here, and it took me 45 minutes to get here. And so that's impossible. You gotta have this system. It's great. I'm glad it's happening. And then when ridership gets there in 20 or 30 years, you'll go to Metro Rail or whatever transportation alternative exists at the time. But more importantly, economic development is the key in South Dade. If you've got hundreds of thousands of people, 12% of the jobs, and you put jobs in Cutler Bay and Homestead or down deep south, you'd reverse the commute immediately, and that's worth $1 billion in capital projects, right? Yeah, with the reverse commute, because it's a level of service A going south on US 1 in the morning, and F going north.
Yeah. So, and I think you and I are aligned on this, but I really see the interconnectivity, right, of transportation to these other issues. And I see it as a three-legged stool: land use, economic development, and transportation.
Absolutely.
And so let's look at those other legs then, specific to Pinecrest. You talked about the land use and the need for housing and the need for jobs. Are there any plans in Pinecrest to maybe look particularly along the South Dixie Highway corridor to redevelop those areas?
Actually, we just kind of wrapped up a giant initiative. We had studied our US 1 corridor about a decade ago and made some changes. We tried to make some significant changes over the past years in coordination with the county's rapid transit zone ordinance. So we had changed in accordance to the rapid transit zone ordinance around the station areas. I think we have 2 or 3 in Pine, Dayland, North, South, and then 136th Street. So we made significant land use changes there. I personally believe they didn't go far enough. They must go further, because I'm not so concerned about height, but I'm concerned about developability. I mean, we absolutely have to have affordable housing within the community. Our community is, and I think every community suffers from this, but I don't almost know anybody that could buy their own home today. Yeah. The prices in our community are off the wall. I mean, we've got $25 million houses within Pinecrest. So
without the salaries to support those prices, right?
No, look, the folks who buy these are uber wealthy folks coming from New York or California or Texas or someplace like that. And welcome to the community, but that and everything else is displacing others to more affordable housing, but it's further away from the jobs. Again, that's a problem. So we need to do our role in Miami-Dade County and enhance the US 1 corridor. Our tenet is we're not gonna break into the residential envelope of the community. There's a hard line, the commercial corridor, but that commercial corridor in Pinecrest was all commercial. Now we're turning it to mixed use. Okay. And so we've taken that plan, we've implemented that plan about 1.5 years ago, and we'll revisit it hopefully in the next year. And I'm looking for some incentives that we can provide the development community that will enable high quality, tasteful, mixed use development, get us some jobs, get us some relatively affordable housing in there, and right next to the transit station. So we want to be an example for other communities, what they can do.
Look, and you look like communities like Coral Gables, which is also an affluent community that's, a beautiful, well-planned community with a lot of history and historic preservation, and they've managed to find a way of increasing their densities to support their commercial needs, but then also to support transit. It's that two-way sword. So it can be done, and density doesn't mean Brickell, right? I think people just assume the worst.
And it doesn't necessarily mean Coral Gables either.
A few additional stories. It doesn't have to be these tall high-rises.
There's a fear of that out there, and like we were talking about the cultural aspect of it, a segment of Pinecrest got all worked up about this, and it was pretty brutal. We ended up being forced into a referendum about not being able to change our zoning without a referendum. Right. And in retrospect, that was a giant mistake on behalf of the opponents, because they got poleaxed in that election. It was like 78 to whatever. Wow. Yeah, and so the people of Pinecrest spoke. They're not afraid of it. We just need to not be afraid of the vocal minority that's just fearful of those people or whatever.
Change sometimes. People just fear change.
Well, yeah. And so as elected officials, as leaders within the community, we just can't be scared of those types of things. We have to do what's right. And I think most of us know what is right. And affordable housing is not a bad thing. Rapid transit is not a bad thing. And jobs in your community are not a bad thing.
And when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about affordable to everyday people. We're not talking about necessarily, the people that are impoverished, but just even teachers, firefighters, police.
The number I was going through during
really housing for the workforce.
The number I was going through during our referendum was it's a $90,000 a year job that qualifies for affordable housing in Miami-Dade County. It's like, why would you be scared of somebody that makes $90,000 a year for crying out loud? I mean, that's if you were a young police officer, accountant, lawyer, urban planner, whomever. That's what we're looking at, teacher, right? Yeah. This is nothing to be scared of. Where are our kids going to go?
That's exactly it.
Our kids can't move back. Nobody can they afford.
I don't want them living with me the rest of their lives. As much as I love them.
I don't have enough room anymore. I've turned their rooms into office space. And
now, an interesting wrinkle in this conversation is the Live Local Act, which of course is state preemption of local zoning to encourage workforce housing. Right? Yeah. Are there any kind of proposed projects in the community? Is that something that you're looking at?
We've not seen any Live Local come to Pinecrest.
Okay.
I have an interesting take on the Live Local Act, and I keep telling the elected officials in my area of the county, if you don't play ball and start to be work constructive, because the old Pinecrest way was no, we don't want it, we're not going to work with you. You can't say no and cross your arms and not be part of figuring out the solution unless you do that, because zoning is a hyper-local thing.
Right.
But economic development, rapid transit, the environment are not hyper-local things. They're regional or statewide issues. I tell them, you better watch out because somebody's going to come and take your rights away from you, and that's what's happening.
Right.
So to all the South Daters out there that don't want to play ball with these folks, they're coming for your zoning if you don't play ball. Pinecrest has been a leader. We play ball. We negotiate. We fight for what we need. But we'll get in the room around the table and try to make the best opportunity for everybody, the county, the state, and whichever. Now, I'd love to see a Live Local project. I'd like to see somebody come in and do something groundbreaking. It would be Pinecrest is a quality, not quantity community. So everything we do is high quality. I'd love to see high quality development in Pinecrest, tasteful. So they're welcome. We're ready to listen.
So I've mentioned a couple times you're an urban planner by trade. You have your own company, the Corradino Group.
Yep.
And so not only are you advancing, these great urban planning principles in your own village as mayor, but you work in communities throughout the county, the state, perhaps nationally. I don't know where you are.
All over the country.
So let's talk about that for a second. What are some of the interesting things you're working on here locally in Miami?
Well, we've always worked on with the TPO or the county or the individual municipalities on transportation master planning. And that's been our thing. I became an expert in South Dade. I've worked, my role in the world was working for municipalities. That's how I got interested. I found it a little bit more interesting sometimes than some of the broader things, just because of what we talked about before. It takes decades for these projects to bear fruit. And when you're working in a local municipality, you can see the results of your labor pretty quickly. That's interesting. I think we've gained a great understanding of how the county and the region works. The interesting thing nowadays is that the world has changed. People are leaving government in droves. Not quite sure why, but now we're working a lot almost as adjunct staff to local governments and, serving as directors of planning departments and development services departments. And now even getting into zoning codes and rewriting the zoning codes, which is particularly interesting. A lot of cities need it. The codes were built in a different era.
Antiquated.
Right? Yeah, and some of the older cities from the 20s and 30s and 40s, and they're just not what you would do today. And so rewriting those codes, then this natural feeling that we're all being overwhelmed by larger homes, people from outside of the community, and how do you work into a zoning code and actually preserve the character of that community while enhancing the quality of life? And that's kind of the art of urban planning that we're into right now, and that's a great opportunity. We're doing that all over the state of Florida and the nation, and it's really a dynamic industry at this point in time. I have two favorite things that I'm working. One is for the town of Palm Beach, right? This is where the Kennedys lived and all that, and that's a remarkable community. It's interesting to work there. And then Miami Shores, which is very similar to Pinecrest. Palm Beach is at the extreme, but they're these affluent communities with beautiful acreage and landscaping. And how do you perfect that? And the locals have some issues on how they want to see it in the future, and delving into that dynamic to get it to work is what we're really focused on right now.
Finding that balance, right?
Finding the balance is true, and it's hard.
It is very hard. Yeah, and people have different definitions of what that balance should be.
Yeah, that's why you gotta figure out what the definition of balance is when you get into the local community, because what you may think as a professional, it's not maybe what they want, and so you got to strike this line between unintended consequences and practicality.
And a big part of urban planning and what you do is working with the community through whether it be design charrettes or so. What is your firm's kind of preferred method of engaging the community? How do you really get them to participate in a way that they will support what you're proposing at the end of the process?
Well, I think it's credibility building, number one. And how do you build trust, and how do you build faith in the process, in your team, in government, and in what you're doing. And that is one-on-one meetings. And we always start with stakeholder meetings where we'll go meet the individual leaders of the community, everything from elected officials to board members to presidents of the Chamber of Commerce to religious institutions, one-on-one, and figure out what they want to see. And then we broaden the spectrum to maybe their membership, congregations of churches, members of chambers of commerce, things like that. And then broader community charrettes and workshops. Now it's a lot of online stuff, a lot of videotape stuff that enables those messages to be given to the community when the community wants to receive it. So if you're sitting around at midnight and you can't sleep, and you get on your computer, maybe you can see the workshop, maybe you can type in your comments, and it's an iterative process where you're learning, never in a hurry to do it. It's better to do it right than to do it fast. And same old stuff we used to do, just being a human being and connecting with somebody one-on-one, but being very thoughtful about that. Listening is key, and then giving your professional advice on understanding what they want, and then how interpreting that to how it can be done professionally and achieve the result that they want.
I think you're absolutely right. The key word there is trust, because there's so little trust in government these days and in each other, right? I mean, we're a very divided country, and that's even seeping down into the local level. So building that trust is essential.
Yeah.
And I would think it's been invaluable for you to have that background, that knowledge as an urban planner, and these experiences in different communities, being able to apply that to Pinecrest. And I'm going to say, you probably can't, the village is very lucky to have you as its mayor because of that combination of background and experience that you're able to bring to it. So is that true? I mean, do you find that has been an advantage in your term as mayor?
I don't know. I think so. I think it's been an advantage. I think the biggest advantage is the ability to listen and not overstep. And I mean, you're an urban planner. There are a few of us out there in leadership roles, right? I mean, it's great to see somebody that in our profession come up, because what we do is study the dynamics of cities for a living. We were trained in it, and we do it. A lot of the other folks have different professions, but this is what we do. And so I think listening and as mayor, being the facilitator of the conversation and not necessarily the activist has always been key. And I want to make sure, I think the planning profession has taught me that you want to make sure that everybody's educated on the issue. Get the facts, get everybody educated, let them speak and their opinions until they feel they've been heard, right? And actually
hear them. Right.
You have,
Don't just pretend.
No, because they know when you're pretending, right? If you just give them 2 minutes and then walk away and you haven't processed what they've heard, you've got to have tough decisions. A lot of these things are tough. So good, hard collegial debates amongst your elected officials. Collegial is the key. And then when it's time to vote, strap it on and vote, man. This stuff's not easy. It's hard to do. So you put on your big boy pants and do your job, and we do it every time in Pinecrest. It's a great community. That's what it's brought me. And trust your staff and managers, because they're that's where the rubber hits the road.
And you do have a great staff. We work with them all the time. They're wonderful.
I could certify they're the best in the industry. So if they're listening,
I'm sure they are. Everybody's listening to this podcast.
I was looking at the numbers of this
Miami.
thing. People say the ratings are off the wall for this thing.
Mr. Mayor, we have about a minute left. Is there anything else you want to mention?
Thank you for having me. I think you're doing an invaluable service to the community with this stuff. it's hard to get this type of information out. There's a lot of opinions out there about this, but you're one of the foremost experts in the community, and I've been doing this for decades. And by you bringing people in that can talk about this stuff, hopefully there's a broader understanding of the issues in the community, and we can get to where we're going faster.
That's the idea, and thank you,
Pleasure.
number one, for being a guest for the second time, but more importantly, for what you do, for your public service, and for all the good work you do through the Corradino group. We really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Our community is better off for you being in it.
Thank you very much. It's very important to me.
Thank you, and we'll have you back again in about a year's time.
I'm looking forward to
hear
it.
about all the new things happening in your neck of the woods.
We'll have a lot of stuff built by then. It'd be a great place.
Great. Well, folks, that's all we have for this segment of Mobility Matters. We welcome you to join us every other Thursday from 9 to 10 a.m. to hear from great leaders like the Mayor of Pinecrest and others. We'd also like to thank our producers here at Community News for producing this lovely program and for providing us this wonderful space. They've been amazing. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do at the CITT, please visit our webpage, miamidade.gov/CITT. We're actively recruiting for both members to our trust. So if you're interested in being a part of the solution, we have several vacancies and opportunities for you to serve. Or you could also sign up to be a CITT ambassador and be our eyes and ears on the transit system. So if you're a regular transit rider, you sign up for the program, you get rewarded with points for submitting your feedback and observations, and you can exchange those points for